Good afternoon. Today is Saturday, April 30th, and this is the child trafficking report for the 29th, yesterday, Friday. And 207 children were brought in from 3 sources and then taken to 14 locations. And this is a special report for the Indianapolis Child Trafficking Operation, Indianapolis My Lab, which is a part of now 40 locations in the United States. And they also have other locations here. I'm sorry, these glasses have glare. Let me switch. They also have other child trafficking locations that aren't complete My Labs, like in the basement of the UN building in New York City, and also like the basement of the White House, where Monday another group of children were gang raped and murdered. ICE is a child trafficking corporation that works along the Mexico-American border. And they had taken 25 children from the greater Los Angeles area, and 17 adults related to these children were taken to the Nazi concentration camp in Yuma, Arizona, where they were murdered. And, or almost, not all, I don't think all of them have been murdered, because it was just yesterday. Let me see, I got to pull up those 17 adults. Six have been murdered. And, you know, like I've said many times before, the government's calling these FEMA campgrounds. The dark side calls the Nazi concentration camps FEMA campgrounds. But they, in exchange, what they do in this child trafficking operation is they exchange children for technology. And they have a new way to kill us. It's not the same way as they killed us in World War II. But after the people are dead in a high anxiety, high adrenaline death, then they process our corpses somehow and turn us into a gray dust. And I've witnessed the Department of Homeland Security employees carrying out containers full of this gray dust and just dumping it into the desert by Yuma, Arizona. And they're also testing other locations too. I was going through the other day, and I pulled up, there were some more concentration camps much closer to Los Angeles, but only like 3 had been killed in one, and 2 people had been killed in the other. Most of them is considered part of the Los Angeles metropolitan area, but it's actually in Yuma, Arizona. And they're kind of like taking the people off to the side. Almost all the people that have been murdered there are Mexicans, because the United States loves to murder people and steal their children. They do that a huge amount in Europe and Africa. And in South America, it's a little different situation. They don't have to murder so many people because people just give up their children to the SOCOM, war criminals. The Air Force brought in 116 children from the Shanghai My Lab. And just if this is your first video, I'll give you an idea. 116 children were gang raped 1,076 times by a total of 302 males. And I find this appalling. I guess most people don't really care. And NATO, war criminal agency, brought in 66 children for yesterday's gang rape and murder from 3 countries of Greece, Turkey, and the Ukraine. And like I said, this report is for Indianapolis. My name is Tori Smith, and I've been monitoring this child trafficking operation for a long time. And when they actually involved me because they wanted me to join the CIA to exploit me for my psychic abilities that Father God gave me years ago. And of course they're stupid, because if Father God's not going to help people rape and murder children. And so if I had said yes, which I never would have, I would have just lost all of my psychic abilities anyway. And 17 of these children were brought to Indianapolis. They were gang raped by a group of 62 males, a total of 173 times. Now I want to clarify, when I give you the report of the child and who murdered them, I also am giving you the total for how many times that child was raped, period, like their whole life. But most of these children aren't raped until they're picked up by United States war criminals. These men that participated were Mike Pence, acting as Indiana governor, Indiana Attorney General Greg Zeller. The Attorney General had a second male from the Attorney General's office, but I don't know his name. There were 7 CIA agents, 3 FBI agents, 6 DARPA, 21 police officers from the Indianapolis Municipal Police Department, and I think that they have a total of 51 involved in the Indianapolis Child Trafficking Operation. 18 from the Indiana State Police, and they are very religious people, meaning satanic and Luciferian religion, which most people of the state of Indiana are. 68% of the people of Indiana are Luciferians or Satanists. And the funny thing is, when I was doing research on that, I found that 27% of those people don't know that they are, which I find just amazing. Like this one woman who watched one of my videos here in Indiana, she said, well, is somebody going to come along and tell me if I should believe this man? And at first I thought that was very funny, and I thought, my God, that's so sad. Is somebody going to come along and tell me what to believe? Why not just create an intent and connect to the truth yourself? Other people who participated in this were John, I don't know how to pronounce his name, he's the CEO of Eli Lilly. John C. Lecklighter, or whatever. Lecklighter, or whatever, who cares? He's a filthy lying murderer. And 3 Indiana sheriffs, but not the sheriff of Whitley County. He couldn't make it for some reason. He and child rapist Jim Banks, who was an Indiana state senator, neither one of those two, both from Whitley County, my county, which I live in. Well, actually, I live just on the border between Whitley and Noble on the Lakes region. But neither one of these men of Whitley County who participated in this child trafficking operation were present. And I'm not going to go through and say how many. Usually I go through and say who raped what child and how many times, but there's a lot. We have a huge amount of children. 107 more have just come in this morning for the United States to be gang raped and murdered. But I would like to go through, and the reason I do this is out of respect for the children. I'm one of the few Americans that believe that children are much more than just trash. Most people believe that children are trash and they should be nothing more than used to be gang raped and murdered in this child trafficking operation. My friend says a lot of people just don't know. But I'm just so old and bitter, and I've been dealing with this for so long, I really think Americans really enjoy this, because people in Indiana worship these men like gods. Okay, child number 1 was a 3-year-old Mexican boy, and he was murdered by what I call CIA agent number 1. There's 2 of them that have been raping and murdering children with Mike Pence for years. This CIA agent, this was the 18th child murdered by this agent, and this child, the 3-year-old Mexican boy, was raped a total of 36 times. Child number 2 is a 4-year-old Ukrainian girl who was raped and murdered, well, raped by many people, but she was murdered by Indiana Attorney General Greg Zeller during rape. And this was his 2nd child that he's murdered during rape. This little girl was raped 106 times. Child number 3 is a 4-year-old Ukrainian girl, and she was murdered by Brent Waltz, Indiana State Senator Brent Waltz, who this was his 6th child he's murdered, and this child was raped 94 times. Child number 4 was a little Chinese boy, a 5-year-old Chinese boy, and he was murdered by an Indianapolis municipal police officer who I call number 1. And this was the 6th child he's murdered during rape. This child was raped a total of 101 times. Children number 5. It was a 5-year-old girl, a 5-year-old Turkish girl, and she was raped by Indiana State police officer who I call number 3. There's 7 police officers of the Indiana State Police who routinely murder children almost every weekend. And this was his 4th child, and this little Turkish girl was raped a total of 257 times. The child number 6 was a Syrian girl, a 5-year-old Syrian girl. She was murdered by Indiana State Senator Roderick Bray. This was his 2nd child he murdered, and this child was raped 73 times. Child number 7 was a little Mexican girl, a 5-year-old Mexican girl, and she was raped by, the man's name is Douglas G. Carter. He's the superintendent of the Indiana State Police. This was the 14th child that he's murdered, and this girl was raped 132 times. They call him the superintendent because he's the number 1 ranked Indiana State Trooper. He's a filthy lying murderer, and he's a monster. Child number 8 is a 5-year-old Cantonese girl, came over from China, Indiana State Police Officer number 5. There was the 5th child he's raped, and this girl was raped, 5th child he's murdered, and this girl was raped 61 times. Child number 9 was a 6-year-old Vietnamese boy. He was raped by the CEO of Eli Lilly, who I can't pronounce his name right, John C. Leclitor, or whatever. This was the 14th child he's raped, and this child, this little Vietnamese boy, was raped 117 times. Child number 10 was a 6-year-old Syrian boy, raped by a trooper, Indiana State Police Officer number 2. This was the 7th child he's murdered, and this little boy was raped 91 times. Child number 11 was a 6-year-old Ukrainian girl, murdered by Indiana State Police Officer number 4. This was the 6th child he's murdered, and this little girl was raped 176 times. Child number 12 was a 7-year-old Chinese girl who was murdered by Mike Pence. This was the 46th child that Mike Pence has murdered, and this little girl was raped 138 times. Child number 13, a 7-year-old Chinese girl, I call her Chinese girl number 2, and she was murdered by a DARPA male that came over here from Montauk. It was the 7th child that he's murdered, and this little girl was raped 97 times. The child number 14 was an 8-year-old Chinese boy. I'm calling him 8-year-old Chinese boy number 1. He was murdered by the 2nd CIA agent that has raped and murdered children with Mike Pence for years. This was the 17th child he's murdered, and this little boy was raped 67 times. Child number 15 was an 8-year-old Chinese boy number 2, and he was murdered by an FBI agent from Langley, Virginia. And I was also raped by this FBI agent. This was the 68th child that he murdered, and this little boy was raped 78 times. Actually, I was raped by Mike Pence and Greg Zeller, and all 7 of these police officers from the Indiana State Police. Actually, I think I was raped by all 14. They added a few more. But 14 of the Indiana State Police men that are participating in the child trafficking operation also sodomized me against my will. They all did. Child number 16 is a 9-year-old Syrian girl. She was murdered by a CIA agent from Washington, D.C. This was the 136th murder for him. 136 children he's murdered during rape. And, 6 through the heart. He stabbed 6 of these children through the heart with a 17-inch Illuminati dagger, and this little 9-year-old Syrian girl was raped 232 times. And child number 17 was a 9-year-old Chinese boy, and he was murdered by Indianapolis police officer number 2. They have 2 officers that have murdered a lot of children. This was the 7th child that he's murdered, and this child was raped 101 times. And there was something else I wanted to mention about, it's April the 30th, as I said, Saturday, and there are 408 people that have decided who has won. I wrote that down. They decided the elections on Tuesday. 406 people, 378 men and 28 women are in control of all the voting machines. And they declared child rapist and child murderer Jim Banks, who's an Indiana State Senator, the winner for the congressional primary. And I don't care for Mr. Banks. He's not just because he has raped little girls. I have a separate report on him, but also because he's accepted $320,000 of stolen money. And this is why, one of the reasons why this child trafficking operation costs so much money to American taxpayers. Well over $1 trillion has been spent. Sometimes they spend between $70 and $100 million a day, usually on Friday, because they have so many children coming in, several hundred. It's always several hundred children on Fridays. And but they just hand out cash. Indiana Governor Mike Pence has $42 million in the bank, and most of that is stolen money from taxpayers. Most of them are in offshore accounts, and now Jim Banks has been given $320,000. But that's taxpayer money, and but they don't care. They live off the United States taxpayer, and it's different than disability. It's different than Social Security. It's literally just going in and stealing money, and people are doing it by the millions. The Obamas took $6 trillion Hillary and Bill Clinton took $6 trillion. The Bush family has taken well over $100 trillion. And as of today, as we enter May 2016, the United States is $19.37 trillion, $19.37 quadrillion in debt, and it's due to people like this who just steal by the millions and the trillions and the billions, and virtually all of them are involved in my lab. Child trafficking, which I'm doing everything I can to shut down. Thank you. Have a nice day.